Hello, everybody. Good evening. Sorry, or good afternoon. Whatever. Fuck. Hello. Today we're playing some modded Minecraft. I don't really have much else to say other than I'm excited. Because I have some mods that I like, and I want to make this like a thing, maybe every Monday, or maybe not, because I have a feeling that that won't be enough to satisfy me. Also, hello there, Wretched Gretch. Welcome. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Let me actually, I think I have the music turned. Oh no, you don't. Okay. I just want to make sure that the game audio is good. I might need to turn it up a little bit. Oh yeah, it was like really quiet. But yeah, hello. I just hope this does not lag a shit ton, because I am, I'm streaming this and it's modded and my PC is not the best, but oh boy. Okay. I might need to turn this down actually. Hold on. I turn down the master volume a little just for myself. I just hope it's not too loud. Oh boy. Okay, sorry, there is like, there might be some stuttering here and there, and some dropped frames, so I do apologize for that, because, I'm playing with about 100 mods, I think, right now. This is a very pretty, biome that we've started in. But yeah, I've got, let's see here, so some of the mods I have are, I can show you actually, I can show you what mods I have. Okay, I was worried that would crash the server. So I have a few of the Let's Do mods. I have the hamsters mod, I have to. This is playing on 1.21.1, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, 1.21.1. I have the RPG series mods. I have, let's see here. I have the dog teleport, I have comforts, I have deco crafts as well. Decocraft. I have critters and companions. I have a exposure, which is a really cool camera mod that my friend told me about. Also, let me close out of some stuff on my computer for some reason. If Clip Studio was open, I don't know why. Friends and foes, which adds as it says here, outvoted and forgotten mobs from the mob vote, and moo booms as well, which is very exciting. Incendium, which is like another biome mod. Nature's Compass, which is very helpful for me, because it's so fucking hard to find biomes without the locate biome command. And I've got, the biomes we've gone. I just realized that I forgot to install a timber mod. Shit. I knew something was missing. Fuck. Okay, hold on. I have to do this real quick. It shouldn't take too long. I have vein miner on as well, which is another thing. So here, this might actually, okay, it might take a while. I just hope it doesn't like lag out the stream. I am so stupid. I'm so silly. Okay, alright, I can close out of Minecraft right now. I have to add a fucking cutting tree mod. Oh my goodness. Wow. That's really funny. I knew I was fucking forgetting something. I always do. Okay. Alright, I got it installed, so hopefully Minecraft won't take like a shit long amount of time to open, but if it does, then it does. But yeah, I hope everyone's been having a good day. I woke up at like maybe like noon, I want to say, so I haven't been up for too long. It's only 2 p.m. here. So I woke up and then I was like, I want to stream something today, and here we are. So I've been playing a lot of Minecraft with friends as of late on a server which has a different mod pack than the one here. Oh, there we go. Okay, let me just resize this. It might take some time to load, so okay, I have to move this. All right. It might take some time to load, and it might lag out stream a bit, so I do apologize if there's any drop frames or anything like that. Because sometimes it has a tendency to freeze up, and oh, okay, well, at least it's going a lot smoother this time. I think it's because I'm allocating a lot of memory, like, to this one, so, alright. Yeah, that was really funny. I always have to have the timber mod on. I cannot fucking cut trees in Minecraft down without it, because otherwise it becomes like fucking infuriatingly. It just takes so long, and it's so annoying. Oh my god. But yeah, I have a ton of, okay, all right, that loaded in really fast, actually. I am very surprised. So I do have shaders on, but if I do need to, I didn't even know there was a mod. Yes, there's a mod for cutting trees. There's a mod for vein mining. Also, hello there, Prince. Hope you're having a good day. I don't know. The thing is, I don't know if I might have to turn off shaders. Don't tell me. Okay, I have keep inventory on, so if I do die, then I'll just respawn with everything in my inventory. I'm gonna put that in there. So yeah, I need to, first off, I need to, ow. It's these fucking, it's blueberries. Ah! Okay, it's okay. And there's also these puffball spores, which I want to take with me. I think the first thing I want to do is, after getting the basic tools and such, I want to make a backpack. So first of, this should, oh, wait, hold on. You know what I forgot? I also forgot to install Jade as well. Fuck, it's fine. I don't need it. This should be birch, right? Yeah, this is just regular birch. Okay. Okay, let's get a crafting table here. So there might, Jade, it's a UI mod that lets you see what you're looking at, basically. But I don't need it. It's fine. I think I do have apple skin installed though, which does like show like food shit. Yeah, it does. Okay. All right. I'm also gonna turn down the music a little bit. Minecraft Pro. Yeah, no, I play with modded Minecraft sometimes, so I do know these things. Okay, I'll also make myself and then a pickaxe. Oh. And then a pickaxe. All right. I do hope the game volume is okay. I would not know. But yeah, this is modded Minecraft, so it is different than your usual Minecraft. So if I shift... Okay, well, I thought that would work. Maybe this one works differently than the other timber mods? Okay, I think this one works differently than the other timber mods. Why bro, speedrunning wood tools, calm down. Oh, you don't really hear it? Okay, well, let me turn it back up then. Yeah, don't hold shift. Oh, okay. Are you sure? Because I have timber on. Oh. Okay, so the other mod I had, made it so you had to do shift while cutting trees down. But I guess this one doesn't, so. Which it does worry me. I do hope it doesn't work on, like, placed blocks. I hope it's only just for, like, trees, because sometimes I use wood in my builds. Oh, and there goes my pickaxe, my axe. Well then, I guess we can go, find a cave or something. Oh, there's some stone right here, so. Only for trees? Okay. All that lumber just falling on my head. Yeah. Ow, 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 ow. Yeah. Alright, let's get ourselves a, that's not what I wanted to do. Let's get ourselves a stone axe. That is not what I wanted to do. Are you sure it's only for trees? Because that just destroyed that. Maybe if I do shift, maybe if I shift and while building, then it'll do that. All right. I fucking forgot to install Jade. Ah, so I can't see what I'm looking at. Wah. That sucks. But yeah, I hope everyone's having a good day. Oh, is it? No, that's not a cave. Hamster headache. Oh. No, my head. Wah. Ow. This should be spruce, I think. All right, that destroyed more trees than I. Oh, game. Okay, that destroyed more trees than I wanted it to. I might need to find the other timber mod I was using and install that later on. Let's see, which one was it? I think it was, hold on, let me see here. Let's see, I could just fucking restart again. Falling, I think it's falling trees. No, hold on. It's, oh gosh, hold on. I had a mine's connected log, that makes sense. No, it's not falling trees. It's a timber mod, but it's not the timber mod. Oh, tree harvester. This one. This one is the one I wanted. Tree harvester. All right, hold on. Sorry, I'm gonna I'm gonna turn off timber. Yeah, delete one project. Okay, whatever. Yeah, okay. Let me get timber and let me get the proper timber mod and also jade as well, because I need both of them because I forgot to install jade somehow and I don't know how. I have no fucking idea how I did not do that, but it's okay. All right, the world. Okay, I can close that out now. Sorry about this, chat. Can't be a Clove stream without some fucking technical difficulties. Apple skin is in here, yes. All right. Okay, everything should be good now. Oh wait, I have to disable timber actually. Hold on, let me do that. There's a fucking thingy here. Okay, an error occurred. Let me close out of that, please. Thank you, Moderanth. Thank you. Delete one project. Okay, cool. And now we have tree harvester. All right, cool. But yeah, apple skin is in here. Also vein miner as well, which I know is probably controversial, but I don't care. It just makes things a lot easier for me. And a lot faster, I guess. All right, so the game is now opening again. I do hope this does not chug or anything. I'm sure it won't because it's basically the same, just with a different tree cutting mod. It just takes some time to open because my PC kind of sucks. Which is fine. It's fine. It's okay. All right, game is opening now. Oh, I gotta resize it. It always opens so tiny on my computer. There we go. But yeah. All right, now we should have everything. Now we just gotta wait for the game to load, which does take a little bit of time, but not too long. I've done it already on the stream, so it only takes like a minute or two. Maybe a little less longer, actually. Back to the craft. Yeah, back to the craft. All right, I don't have any texture packs on right now. Usually I use like Mizuno's, but I don't have it installed, so yeah, not today. I love how Mizuno's looks though. It's very pretty. I have a lot of like add-on packs for it. I just don't have it installed right now, which is makes me a little sad, but it's okay. It's my favorite. It's been my favorite pack for like years and years and years. I do have Lushi installed, which is like a one I found off the or maybe it's Ayushi. I don't know. But it's one I have. If you see here, resource packs. Yeah, this one, it might be Lushi. But I have it. Oops. I didn't even fucking touch anything. Why are you throwing me to a loading screen? Minecraft! Why would you do this to me? Hold on. I didn't even touch anything and it threw me to a loading screen. Okay, whatever. It's fine. Minecraft modded, I don't even know you can customize. Yeah, you can customize Minecraft a lot. You can do texture packs, resource packs, data packs, mods. There's a ton you can do. Okay. There's a ton you can do. All right, okay, we're back. So now this should work the proper way that I'm used to. Like this. And now I have Jade on, so now I can see what I'm looking at. So I fucking cheese it by cutting normally first and then crouching. Yeah, you can do a lot with Minecraft. You can do a lot. It's really cool. And then like there's some mods that allow you to do like huge complex contraptions like create, which I do not have installed right now. Also, is that what? Oh, that's white enemy. I do not have create installed, but you can do some crazy shit with it. All these biomes that you're seeing are also modded in. They are not vanilla. I also need to get food. What was that tiny bell? Oh, that's just the hamsters mod. I'm ignoring it. It's kind of like yeah, just showing you like all this shit. I don't really I don't know if there's like a way to go make it go away, but anyways. Oh no, fuck. No. Oh, I hate this packed snow bullshit. It's so annoying. Especially when you're in a snow biome. No, stop doing that to me. Stop doing that. I don't want to melt. No, why did they add this bullshit? Why? Get me out of here. Yeah, it's if you fall through, you can freeze to death, basically. And I don't want to. All right, this is yeah, that's the packed snow from vanilla Minecraft, which is great. Did I spawn on a fucking island? Alright, I guess I might have. I think I have to go back through to get to a forest or something, like an actually good forest. I mean, this one is very pretty, but I don't want to, like, start my base in the snow biome. The thing about me, when I'm playing Minecraft, is I take forever to find, like, the perfect place to, put my base in, so... I'm gonna take this, though. Oh, I don't want the green mushroom. No, I don't want the green mushroom! Because I can't plant it on anything. I found that out on a server I play with a friend. But I will take these flowers. I hope the audio... I hope you guys can hear. I cannot tell because, I cannot... Oh, there's a cave. Is this a cave? No, this is not a cave, but there is coal. I just bullshit in a random lake and build it until I get bored. No, that's real. Ugh. Audio's really good? Alright, cool. I just want to make sure it wasn't too quiet or too loud. I should probably make a stone pickaxe. I should probably do that. This one's stone axe is already almost dead. Do I have enough to make... I do not. I do not have enough to make another stone axe. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to find some iron. What am I doing? I'm going to try to find some iron. I'm gonna turn down the game a little for me. But yeah, I need to find like a good area to set up base. Oh, there's a village over there. I gotta stop taking damage. I gotta stop taking a shit ton of damage. Ah! Okay, it's fine. Let's go swimming. I thought I had better animations. Oh, wait, do I have? No, I do have better animations on, I think. There's like some small animations. So I think I see a village over there. I also have waystones as well, which is like a must-have for me because it helps me teleport all over the place. And then you immediately say, yes, I did. Yes, I did. I also have a better combat, which allows me to do some crazy shit with swords and axes. And I also have, I think I have a swords mod that adds a bunch of crazy ass shit. Yeah. So I'm excited about that. But yeah, there's a village over here. This might be. Oh, is that a fucking cherry grove? Holy shit! This might be a perfect place for me to start. Holy shit! This is perfect. This is perfect, you guys. This is perfect for me. I mean, it's also right next to a river as well, which is great. Oh man. Okay, that's actually awesome. I need to find. I need to find like a bed or something. Oh, I almost died. Oh, there's a waystone up there. I need to sleep. I'm gonna have to kick it out. Ooh, game. No, don't fucking slam the door on me. I'm gonna have to kick you out of your bed. Sorry, sir. Fuck. I'm gonna take this. This is mine now. Sorry. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna take this with me. I should make a sleeping bag, but I don't have any, I don't have any wool, so I can't right now. Yeah, there's a kitty over there. I need to get up here. Okay. I need to get this waystone. Grid. Alrighty, this is a perfect place to start, I think. I can set up over here near the river. Oh, there's a cave down there. Okay, I think I'm gonna venture into the cave real quick. I only have a wooden sword though, so I can make a stone sword really quick. Okay, this is fine. Yeah. I also have another thing I have that is cool is a spawn animations mod. So that lets me the spawn animations mod lets makes it so that when the monsters pop up, they you can see when they pop up or when they come out. I don't know. Okay. Is that emerald? Huh. I can't mine that. Oh, but there is some iron here, so I will take. That's really rare. Emerald is like really rare, I swear to God. Okay. Oh, there's some more iron here, so I'll take that. Alright, and then I can make a I can make myself a furnace down here to the fucking the ambience when you're in a cave and it's like and there's like nothing around is crazy. And so it is dark and scary. Alright, furnace, and then I'll just put some spruce logs in there. I know that zombie. Wow. It is not. Yeah, the wow, bruh. The bruh. Oh, there's some more coal here. I'll take that. I have to. Okay, I have to be really careful with. I like the coal, the vein miner mod. It's very useful. I should probably heal myself a little. I'm also playing this on normal difficulty, so I mean you can probably tell because I get hungry and shit. So, but on easy mode, you do not get hungry, which is interesting. I mean at least that's how it works if I recall. I could be wrong though. The glowing thing? Oh, that's a lichen, I think you pronounce it. Yeah, that's like lichen or whatever the fuck. I don't know how to pronounce it. Is that lapis? No, that's blueberry. Yeah, that's glow lichen. Yeah, you must have dropped one of my blueberries. My bluebies. Where did I put the... Hold on. Where did I put the fucking, furnace? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. I lost it. It's somewhere around here. It's somewhere. I don't think it's this way, though. Turn back. I'm looking! It's in the crater? Oh, no, it's not here. Maybe in here? No, it's not down there. Oh, wait, I think it's... Is it over here? Fuck. I put it in a really stupid spot. Because I'm an idiot. Okay, it's not over there. Oh boy. Okay. This is how I play Minecraft. I fucking get lost really easily. The crater. I'm looking. What do you mean the crater? What do you mean? I don't understand. There's craters everywhere. Cause I'm in a fucking cave. I don't know what you mean. I really don't know. Eh. It's fine. It's fine. I can just make another one. When you keep walking past where you dropped your berry, I don't know where that is! Am I just fucking, is it just like, is this a skill issue where I just can't fucking see? Here? Maybe I can see it on the map? No. Near, the bluest orange ore. Oh, the copper? You mean here? Oh! Okay. I'm stupid. It's okay. We have an iron pickaxe now. Whatever! Okay, I need to eat more. I'm surprised no mobs have really been spawning down here. I guess we're not like that far down and it's not too dark, so that's probably why. Oh boy, I'm out of food. That's not good. Oh wait, this is where I came in and that must have been when I was going. So if I die, that's fine. I'm gonna take this with me though. Because if I die, then I'll just spawn back where I was, but then I'd have to trek all the way back to the village and that would not be very fun. So yeah. But yeah, like I said, my main goal right now is to find a, to make a backpack for, so I can have extra space. I have a lot of, I think I have enough coal right now. I think I have enough. It says there's some villagers down here? Did they fucking stumble in here? Or maybe they're above me. I don't know. Anyways. Oh shit! Wow, you do a lot of damage. Oh my god! I am almost dead. Oh boy, okay. That is not good. I'm at half a heart. Oh boy, I don't have any food, but I want to keep exploring this cave, but I don't have any food. And if I take like any fall damage, then I'm dead, so. Okay. I'm not even gonna comment on that. I'm not even gonna. Ow. I'm not even gonna fucking comment on that. It's okay. All is well. I can just go back there. Head leaf insect. I need to get myself some armor and shit. But I need to make a backpack and stuff first. Wah! Hi sheep. Oh, I can make. No, I don't have any iron on me. I was gonna say I can make some shears to get some wool, but I do not. It's for a sleeping bag, but I don't have any iron, and I can't make any right now. I need to get some. I need to actually raid that village for like food and shit. I didn't even check what was in the village. Ow. Oh, I thought I didn't take any fall damage there. That's surprising. Ow. Okay. Wait. Oh no! Well, I didn't die, so that's good. But I need to raid this village. Oh my gosh, this has been. I have barely even started, and we already died once. I'm so happy I have keep inventory on because otherwise shit would be fucked up. I cannot play Minecraft without keep inventory on because if I die, then I get really sad. Oh. Onions. These ones are from Let's Do Farm and Charm though. These ones are not the Farmer's Delight onions, which is very interesting. Oh, these cucumbers? Yes. Yes, these are the cucumbers for the hamsters. Yes, I need these seeds. I need these seeds for the hammies. Okay, well I got some onions, but I don't really know if I need them right now. Also, I need to dump all my shit in a chest. Pizza recipe? Yes. There is some really interesting mods on right now. Or like it's part of the modded Minecraft. I have a lot of food mods that like give you a lot of cool recipes for food, so that is why. Alright, I don't know if this village actually has anything like in it. Like I was hoping for like, oh, there's some wild beetroots here. I was hoping, ooh, what do you got? You got potatoes, you got tomatoes, you got, okay, tomatoes there. 6 of them. I was really okay, there's like nothing in this fucking village. What the fuck? This village fucking sucks. There's horses, but there's like literally nothing here. There's nothing. You guys gotta step up your game. Come on. All right, is this the? No, this is that's a different cave. I was hoping for something. All I got is onions. I guess I can take some of their crops though. I mean they just have tomatoes, so yeah, not even wheat. Yeah, well. No, they have it growing, but nothing to. Oh wait, hold on. There's more over here actually. Maybe there's like a chest somewhere. Maybe. Oh, this is from the spell engine mod, which is cool. Yeah, there's nothing here, that's fucked up. What's this? Sakura. Ooh. All right. Well, whatever. So I want to make my house somewhere around. Oh, these are pretty. Japanese orchid. Ooh. I'm gonna make my house somewhere around here, I think. Somewhere in this area. Oh boy, it's getting dark though. I can already tell. There goes my axe. Just want to grab some cherry logs and blossoms as well. Is this a normal cherry grove? Okay, so this is a sakura grove and a cherry grove, so that's why. Okay. Alright, well it's getting dark, so sleep on a tree. I can't. I can sleep here though. I'll just sleep right here. Snark me. Snark me. Alright. Okay. God, I need better food immediately. I need to go out and kill some animals and shit. Okay. So there's some cows over there which I can get for leather and beef. So I need beef, and the backpack is hold on. Oh. Hold on. Sorry, it's being weird. Okay. backspace. No, hold on, hold on. If I have to full screen this for a sec. Sorry. That's why. Okay. Sorry. It was backpack. Okay. Sorry. It's a little big right now, but I will fix it in a sec. Backpack is okay. It's just leather, string, and chest. Okay, cool. Let me go back to the way it was. All right. Just leather, string, and a chest. All right, cool. All right, so there's some cows over there that I can get string, leather from, not string. I will need, okay, there's one leather. I also get beef from these guys as well. Okay, that's 2 leather. I still need like 2 more. I need 2 more, and then we're good. Oh, but I gotta eat. Well, I can start setting up, right around here. Like, I can make a basic setup, like a chest and a furnace and such. But I don't know, do I really want to live right here? Or, like, I want to live, like, near the river. Because living near the river is, like, very nice. So I think I have an idea. And also, I don't know if there's, like, there's a snow biome over there, but I don't know if there's a desert or anything nearby. And the reason I say that is because deserts are very useful. Because of the cactuses they have in this mod, because I have DecoCraft and I need green dye, as well as blue and red dye. I think living near yeah, I'm just trying to find a good spot. It's just because this river is a little funky. Maybe over there? Like right over there. I think over there is a good area. Like over on this side of the river. And I can always just plant some cherry trees as well here, so. Alright, I need to set up like a very quick base. Like right here. Yes, the water is very pretty in with shader. Oh my god, look at this area. Look at over there. Hold on, how do I zoom in? I thought it was V, but I do have a zoom mod. Hold on. I think it's in keybinds. There's like should be something here. For zooming. At least I thought I had a zoom mod, but I might not have one. Gorgeous, yeah. Okay, I don't think I have a zoom mod. I thought I did, but I guess not. I thought I installed one, but I must have forgot. But it's okay. But this is a very pretty area. I could also try building like a house on the water or something. That could be really pretty. Anyways, I need to set up my base here, so let's get some chests going on here. Oh my god, you know what I forgot? I forgot the crates mod. There's so many fucking mods I keep forgetting to install. It's okay. I don't necessarily need it right now, but it's fine. Okay, I'm just gonna put all this here. I'm gonna take this coal with me, and I'm gonna start cooking some of this beef as well. What does it need to make a smoker? You need oh, that's really easy. Okay, wait. I need to get some stone. There's some stone over there. Well, actually, there should be some stone on this side as well, somewhere. Wait, I should probably mark my spot where I'm fucking living. Hold on. Crate? Yeah, there's a crate mod. It makes storage a lot easier, I guess. Or it makes storage a lot simpler. Alright. We got our waypoint for home figured out, so that's nice. I'm just gonna open up. Okay, cool. Alrighty. Let's go get some stone. Unless I probably put some stone in the fucking chest and I didn't realize, but it's okay. There's some right here, so it's fine. Alright. Alright, I'm just gonna grab like a bunch of cobble. I just don't want to grab too much because I don't want to waste. I don't want to use my pickaxe too much because I just made it. So, and I did make 2 of them though for that exact reason. So, yeah, this is a very pretty area. I'm glad I spawned in a nice spot. If I spawned in the middle like a fucking desert or something, I would have screamed. Because that's happened before. That's happened before and it's never fun. It's never ever fun. Alright, and then I need some... Okay, so that's very easy. You just do like this, bum 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 bum, and then smoker. So, so that allows me to cook meat a lot faster. So I'm gonna take some coal from here, put it in there. Voila. Oh, I also don't have the sort inventory mod as well. God, there's so many things I forget. There's so much I forget. It's awesome. I did have some cobble in my chest. I did. Ah! Ah! Oh man, okay. Yeah, no, they added the smoker is kind of new. It was added in like gosh, I don't know when it was added, but I think it was added alongside the blast furnace, which lets which is good for ores and stuff. Yeah. How do you make a blast furnace actually? Hold on. Blast. Okay. All right. Blast furnace. How do you make that? Iron. Okay, smooth stone, furnace, and iron. Yeah, that one's significantly a little harder to make. Anyways, there's my food. So that's nice. Now I can heal up, which is really great. I'm gonna keep these onions in here as well, along with the cucumber seeds for when I start a farm. But yeah, I think actually I do. I'm thinking if I want to do like it on the water. Like a very pretty on the water house, or if I can have it by the water. I think I might have it by the water, like in this area. So I'm gonna have to like carve this out, which is gonna take a little bit of time. But that's okay. That's okay. I'm already starting to just get rid of some of the plants here. But yeah, I think I'm gonna have like a cutesy like by the water cottage or something. But there's gonna be like a dock or something, like a fishing dock. So it's gonna be very cute. Alright, I need to make, I do need to get more iron, so, yeah, my spawn point is reset, so that's good. So now I can just venture out. Wait, hold on, I do need to make more torches, though. Yes, now I can venture out into a cave and get some iron and some other shit, and if I die, it's fine, because I just respawn. I'll just respawn at the place well, I should have gotten more food, actually. There's no cows around here, which kind of sucks. There's sheep over there, which you can get mutton from, but I want to save them for the farm that we're eventually going to have. So, that's going to be fun. There's more coal right here. My voice is a little... Let me drink... I have my Arizona iced tea 0 right here. There were around the village. Yeah, there were a few. Alright, okay. I'm good. Alright, I got my Arizona iced tea. With my voice. Oh, there's more coal here. I'll just grab it. I don't really need it right now. I'll grab it. It's always useful. I remember sometimes it's like so hard for me to find coal. Oh my god, that was so much. Vein miner is a very interesting mod. Wow. That it's very, I like it. I know it's very probably controversial because like look at it took like a fucking huge chunk out of that. It's controversial because it makes mining like a lot easier, I guess. Oh, there's a hole here. Perfect. Ow. Perfect. Yeah, that's part of that's vein miner. Oh, there's a spider. I can kill it for its string because I need string for the backpack. Give me, bitch. Come here, bitch. Come here. Got you. Oh my god, skeleton. Oh, I hate skeletons. I don't have a shield or anything like that. Ah. What would, yeah, mining should be easier. Okay, hold on. I got jukes. Hold on. There we go. Okay, he's dead. I don't like skeletons. I really hate them. They're so annoying. They are like the worst mob in this game ever. Whoever created them should feel very ashamed of themselves. There's a spider. Oh, there's a spider chasing me now. Where are you? Oh my god! You came out of nowhere. Give me your string. Give me your string. Did it not give me string that time? Oh. Okay, there's some iron up there. It's like a few pieces. I'll take it. Okay. A zombie with a... Okay, you got a shovel. Very cool, man. I wonder if it'll drop it. Sometimes they drop their shovels. Nope, didn't drop it this time. Oh, I forgot I also have the hats mod on. Oh, this goes deep. This goes deep. I gotta be careful here. But yeah, as I was saying, I have the hats mod on, but sometimes monsters will drop, avenging the dead spider brother. Yeah, well, it didn't exactly work, did it? As I was saying, sometimes monsters drop hats when you defeat them in that mod, and then you can wear them, and that's really cool. Okay, we're already venturing. Oh, there's a creeper down there. We're already venturing into Deep Slate. Bye bye. Okay, I thought I was gonna drop down and die there, but I didn't. How much iron do I have right now? I have 20. That might be good enough. Like I said, if I die, it's fine. It's fine. It's really fine. Okay, because I probably will. I mean, it's easy. It's the easiest way to get back, anyways. Oh, lapis. Be careful when you mine. I know. I know. I know. I know. I could easily, very easily fall down and die. I don't want to treat it as life or death. I die to get back. That's how I work, and that's how I play Minecraft. That's how that's how I play this game. Alright, I need to get away from these monsters. Okay. Ooh, some gold. Did I see diamond for a sec there? I thought I did. I didn't. I don't need it. If it's gonna drop all the way down there, then I don't need it. Hello, creeper? Thank you. Oh, who's fucking shooting at me? You asshole. Clove has never mind with this. I have never. You're right. Alright, that was... Oh, I got a recipe for a skeleton backpack. That's cool. Oh, diamonds! Chat! There's a creeper behind me. Hold on. Can I get these, please? Before you fucking explode? Thank you. Yeah. Okay. That's fine. More iron. I found some diamonds, so now I can make a diamond sword. But I don't know if I want to keep them for trying to get armor or something later. I don't know. See, you know, it's weird. Usually I'm like a scared little baby when I'm in Minecraft caves. But I think with the spawn animations, this is the... Yeah, I turned off mob griefing. So the creepers can't blow up a shit. Because then it gets really fucking annoying. No. Why is there skulk down here? Oh, fuck. I hate the warden! Okay, I don't see any screamers, though, so that's good. I don't see any of the skulk screamers, so we should be fine. They're so fucking annoying. Even with these mods, I still be a baby. No, that's fair. That's fair. I usually am, but I think maybe because I've been playing Minecraft so much lately, it's just like, you get used to things. You get used to these things. I'm gonna get rid of this. And this one as well. There's no skulk screamer, so it's fine. So I have enough, I think, so I don't have enough leather just yet for the backpack, but I do have enough string, which is nice. But I also may want to get the tank upgrades on it as well. I don't necessarily need the, where am I going? I don't necessarily need, I gotta get against me. Yes! That'll be so fun. With the Essentials mod, which I also forgot to install, but that's neither here nor there. You can do peer-to-peer hosting, which is really cool, for free. So, you just need to download you just need to have the mod downloaded, and then you can join me, which is really cool. It's peer-to-peer, so yeah. Okay, so there's no diamonds over here. Oh, there's some gold up here though. But yeah, and then soon enough it won't be needed though, because oh, there's so many spiders over there. soon enough the Essentials mod won't be exactly needed anymore, because they're adding a thing to Minecraft. At least that will be in like a later version, but they're adding it so you'll be able to you'll be able to host your own server peer-to-peer without the need of any mods, or like without the need of any mods or like server hosting sites such, which is very cool. I swear to God, I saw an opening back to where I was, but I can't find it. Oh, here it is. Okay. Is that diamond over there? Yes, more diamond. Yes, come to me. Come to me. But yeah, it's very exciting. Hosting was so annoying back. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a lot easier now than it was back in the day with like the advent of mods and such. But yeah. Oh, that is scary. I have no idea what service that would be. I had my own server with all Aternos, but somebody had the great decision to post it to an anonymous forum, and I got in the entire server got fucking grief, so I had to roll it back. That was fun. I'm pretty sure I was paying for that one as well, which is great. But now I've learned my lesson, and I only do it like I only let people I know in, and I don't post it publicly anymore. So that was kind of my fault. Yeah, that was like that was about 4 years ago, so it's been some time. There's a creeper. There's a bunch of creepers over there. Are you fucking running at me? Blow up the other one. Blow up the other guy. Alright. Oh, hat! I got a hat bag! Nice. Okay, I don't see any diamonds over here. Yeah, but it was about 4 years ago, and then the person who did it came out about it and told me, and I was like, I don't forgive you. If you're gonna post my fucking server on that forum specifically, if you know, you know which one it is. Also, I'm almost dead, so okay, that's fine. Then yeah, no, I'm not gonna forgive you. But yeah, I don't know. It was a time, definitely. I was a lot more immature, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. Okay, let me put this in the. Let's see what hat we get. But yeah, now I've learned my goggles. Now I've learned my lesson, and I. Yeah, it was somebody I knew too. It was somebody I knew. They just had some kind of like grudge against me, and I don't know why. Which sucks. But it's fine. It's all in the past. So cute. No, just they don't fit over my eyes correctly on my skin. It's really funny. Let's see original. It's really fucking funny. All right. Okay. Let's see here. So, if there are any cows in the vicinity, I can get some leather. See any? There might be some near the village, but there might be some in the forest as well. So I'll check there. But yeah, it was somebody I knew, so that sucked. But I have enough string, and I have some diamonds and such now. Oh, I should probably make myself some armor though. Let me make myself some booties. Cute. You know, very, very basic armor. Oh, I should also make myself a shield, shouldn't I? How do you make a shield again? Okay. I can do that. Make myself I can make myself a diamond kite shield, but I don't want to. That's like a waste of my fucking diamonds. I'm gonna make myself a diamond helmet. I know that's like a bit of a waste, but any extra defense is appreciated. So, and then I'm gonna make myself I think I have enough for a diamond sword and a diamond pick. So that's nice. Nice. Okay, cool. I'm gonna put it that way. I don't need to worry about anyone trying to steal my shit because I'm on single player. Get the sword. Yeah. All right. I need to make myself I need to make myself an iron axe as well because I need a new axe. I need to ask you a question though. You like my new axe? All right. Put some coal there. Okay, cool. And then gunpowder. All right. Okay, to just be mean, I'll steal in spirit. Fuck! Okay. I need to make a chest for the backpack. So I'm gonna have the materials on hand. Oh, I have an idea. I'm gonna take some, so I can make oh, that's not what I want to do. I'm gonna make a crafting table and just have it with me. Oh, okay. I'm also gonna put this book away. Don't need that. All right, and then I'll my game crash? Okay, no, it just froze. That was weird. I don't know why that happened. Okay. And I don't have any food though, that's the thing. I just have these onions. So that's not good. Yeah, I need to get more food. I need to find some cows. So let's go over here. Go over here to get some cows. Hopefully. Oh, I could also wait, hold on. I mean, if I need food that badly, I can also, there's a bunch of salmon in this river. Oh. If I need food that badly, but right now I think I'm good. So pretty. So pretty. My house is gonna be so fucking pretty on this little like hill area. It's gonna be so great. It's gonna be so awesome. I'm just thinking what wood I want to make it out of. I think I want to make it out of aspen wood. If you want some more spiders, make a fishing rod. Yeah. Fishing is fun. But it gets a little boring, I guess. Let's go yeah, let's go fish! Woo! Alright. Oh, there's a little bit of a forgotten forest here. That's really cool. There's some sheep there. Okay, I can just get rid of these sheep for their mutton, actually, and some wool. Yeah, it's fine. I'm sorry if that was really loud. I apologize. Okay. Alright. It's not that worth it to get rid of sheep. Also, there's a bunch of little hamsters in this forest. I can see them on the map. Oh, hello, little me. Hello, little guy. Hello, my family. Okay, I giggle. Hello, my family. My little hammy family. They all running from me because I'm scared. I'm a scary big hamster, and they don't want to deal with that. This is a very pretty biome that's in the biome Yukon. Where are all the cows? I'm only seeing sheep. Did you do big run? Yes, I did. I got bronze trophy. I'm not the best at it. I'm not the best at, I mean, I did it like with random people, so that's also probably why. And also, but I'm not the best at it. But I got bronze, so that's nice. I got like a high score of like 91 eggs, I think. So that's cool. Alright, cow. Alright, I need just one more leather. Gimme. Gimme! You found me. I got silver. Oh, that sucks. Oh, I got enough. Okay. Now I can make a backpack. Backpack. This one. Yeah. I don't have the tanks. So I can put this on. And I can access it with, oh gosh, okay, hold on. What did I set the keybind to? Hold on. There's a I set it to V. Okay, whatever. It's a bit random, but it's fine. All right, so now I can put this in the backpack. Now I have a little more space, so that's good. And if I press F5, I'm wearing it. It's very cute. Okay, all right. So I'm gonna do a little bit of exploration. Ooh, there's a weeping witch forest over there. What is the weeping witch? Oh, the witch hazel. Sorry, the witch hazel. Okay, witch hazel wood is like green. That could be cool for like a library or something. But I'm not really that interested. So it's also a very small biome. It looks like. Oh, there's an aspen boreal there though, right? I need that. I need aspen. But yeah, we're doing a little bit of exploring. A clover field could be like a camping. That would be so cute. That would be so cute. Alright, more cows out of the way. More beef in my inventory. Alright, so there's an aspen boreal over here, and I love the fucking. If you can see here the color of aspen. Aspen is very like it's like a salmony pink, so it's very pretty. So I want it. Oh, and there's some dark oak here. That's perfect. Yes. That's perfect. Okay. Ah, man, I only have one iron axe though, so this is gonna probably die a little fast, but it's okay. Oh, there's that music. Oh, there's some iron here. Cool. Wow. All right, I'll take that. Well, okay. So there's a weeping witch forest, and there's an aspen boreal over there. Which is really cool. Oh, was that a single? There was only a single aspen tree here. That's really interesting. It's over there, so I gotta trek down a little. But the combination of dark oak plus aspen is probably be really pretty, so that's what I want to do. I did grab some saplings as well, so I just have to be careful in the dark oak forest though, because monsters. Monsters, scary monsters. But I do want to get some dark oak. Yeah, they have a tendency to spawn because of how dark it gets in the dark oak forest. There's also spiders spawning in the weeping witch, the hazel forest. So that's interesting. Whoa, there are monsters spawning here. Okay, right. I guess the light level is dark enough for that. Am I fast enough? Okay, it didn't care. It didn't follow me too far. Yeah, this axe is gonna die pretty fast. And I don't have, I mean, I do have iron, but I don't. I spawned in this creepy free forest part and witches jumped me. Oh no. What was that? I heard something pop. Huh, weird. Alright, let's go to the aspen boreal over there. Oh, the hamster was sleeping and I uncrouched and it scared away. No. No. I don't have any food. Fuck. Why didn't I bring any food with me? Wait, no, I might have food in my backpack. Hold on. Check. Yeah, I have some onions. Hammer. Yeah, it fucking ran away. I'm so sad. I'm so sad. How do you get them? You have to give them cucumber slices. And so I have to plant some cucumbers. I love this song that's playing right now. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but I love this this soundtrack. It's so good. Right. I'm probably not gonna be oh, there's some spruce here. I'll also take some spruce because I like the way the logs look for spruce. And also the way the dark oak logs as well look. I can always come back here. It's not too far from home. I just don't want to be out for too long because I want to actually start building. I want to get somewhere today. I want to get somewhere. Alright, that might be the end of... Okay, my axe is almost dead, so I gotta be careful. Maybe if I cut like one more tree, I think... Ooh. Let's cut down this huge ass spruce. Okay, there it goes. There it goes. Oh man. Well, we got a lot of wood. Alright. Well, that's the end of my axe, so I think that's the end of my journey for now. I'm gonna put some of this stuff in my... Okay. Well, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna drown myself so I can get back. That's what I usually do. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna go swimming for a bit, and I'm gonna let myself just drown. Just drown. Drown. It takes a while though sometimes, which is annoying. Oh wait, wait. There's a village over here. And the village means a waystone. And a waystone means I can get back. So, I don't need to drown myself. And a village also means chest to raid. I locked in. I locked the fuck in. Okay, this village has a lot more shit in it. I can already tell. Hello, baby, sleeping. Cute. I can already tell there's more to... Well, actually, no, not really. Not really. But there was some bread in the chest, so that is nice. That is very nice. And they might have like a furnace or... Okay, that's a smoker, not a blast furnace. Oh, what happened here? Okay, so clearly a fox came in and killed one of the sheep. Or wait, no, maybe it was a wolf. I don't remember what fucking kills sheep in Minecraft anymore. But something came in and murdered one of the sheep, and now it's going to be a village mystery. Ooh. All right. More bread. Oh, green beans. I'll take that. Green bean gardener. Oh, and there's also something here. Oh, books. These are very useful. Paper as well. Paper is very useful for the camera mods. Look at the trees kind of like glow at night. That's really interesting. The witch trees. Oh, I'll take these. Yes, and I'll take apples and bread. Forbidden fruit. Ooh. Oh, I need this. Yes. Pumpkin! Pumpkin! I don't have an axe to... Well, actually, oh, you can harvest them with a sword? Oh, ah! Scared the shit. What is it holding? Oh, it scared the fuck out of me. Minecraft is a game that scares me sometimes. That was his pumpkin. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, sir. Not your pumpkin anymore now, though. Haha. And take this stone cutter as well. That actually scared the fuck out of me, though. Which is really funny. You just came out of nowhere. I was just trying to I was deceived by the pumpkin. I was deceived by the pumpkins. You caught me in my weakest moment. I was deceived by the... Did I already check? I already checked this chest. Stay inside, little baby, the villager. Stay inside. It's night. You don't want to get killed. Oh, there's another... I think I already checked this house, actually. Wee. Yeah, that's where the stone cutter was. Okay. Well, you know, that could have been better. But now that we have a waystone, I can teleport back, so... Yay. So I can teleport back and forth from the Aspen Boreal now, which is very nice. Oh, there's a cocoon here. I need that. I'm at a very pumpkin-y time in my life. I am so excited for autumn. Oh, actually, there's more over here. I'm so freaking excited for autumn. Oh, wait, no, this is where I came in, isn't it? Yeah. Where's the waystone? I think it's over there. I'm so excited for autumn. Like, blah. It's one of my favorite... It's my favorite season, I think. Okay. Okay, I thought I heard a zombie. Alright. Okay, so my home is over... there. Alright, I think I just need to... Oh, I also, if I need to, I can steal crops from the village here. I just need to head back over there and go to sleep. Oh, there's some horses over... Oh, there's a bunch of... Yeah, there's a shit ton of cows here, so I can grab them later when I get a lead or something from killing a wandering trader, because I'm a monster. That autumn seems very you. Yes, autumn, spring... Well, actually, no, honestly, if I'm being completely honest, I like all seasons. I can't pick a favorite. I think my least favorite probably is winter, because it's just too cold, but it's very pretty also. But I just love all of them. All of them have, their benefits, and, like, most of them have their, what's the opposite of benefits? I want to say withdrawals? Withdrawals? I don't know. But, but except for autumn, because autumn is the best fucking season ever. Autumn is the peak of season, so it doesn't have there's nothing wrong with autumn. Autumn, why can't I find the words? Autumn doesn't have any, oh gosh, okay. Sometimes I can't find the word for shit. Also, there's a zombie here. He's gonna, oh yeah, burning. Haha, lol, haha, silly, huh? You're dead. Also, I got a hat bag. Let's see what's in this one. I don't want this. Alright, I think, perhaps... Place some torches around the area. Perhaps we can start on... Oh, I got a shit ton of iron. Perhaps we can start on... our house. Yes. I need to clear out the area first, though. I need to use a shovel. Alright, let me cook some of this beef, though. I have one more diamond, so that's perfect. But if I need to, I'll just make some iron shovels and stuff. Yes, the best part. Yes, the best part, building. Exactly. You understand. So I need to clear out this area over here. I want it to be like a small and simple cabin, but I'm gonna add like a basement that has like a bunch of storage and stuff in it. You know, it's gonna be very cute. And I also have DecoCraft as well, so I can do a lot with the decoration, so I'm very excited. And if I need more aspen, I'll just head back to the village and then get more aspen. But I might be fine because I might have grabbed enough, but I don't know. And I think there's also one over there as well that I can check out. And you know, if I'm lucky, there could be a waystone over there. So if I'm lucky. All right, so I'm gonna build out this riverbank area a little, just to have some more space because I don't want to like get rid of too much of the mountain here because it's very pretty. But then again, I do want space for like other stuff as well, so I might eventually have to. But as it is right now, I think. Yeah, hold on, do I have an axe on me? No, I do not. As it is right now, I just want to get rid of a bit so I can have like a cute little cozy like cottage cabin thing going on. This okay, I guess I'll just make myself a new axe because oh right, it's gone. Right, I completely forgot. It was gone because I used it a lot. So let's get rid of this one. Okay. I guess is that the first time I'm picking up oak wood? Cool. Cool. I don't really use oak too often because it's a little boring, you know. I mean, it's very basic, but it's cute. It's cute. Alright, then my least favorite part probably is like the whole getting rid of like not landscaping in sense, but like carving out like I guess part of the mountain to or carving out the land, I guess. Hey, oak is lovely. Okay. It's just very basic, but okay. Okay, I get it. I am a prince, so I have higher standards of wood types, I suppose. Not really. It's just whatever looks nice. Okay. Well, I don't care that you also are. It doesn't matter. My kingdom is more prosperous. No, I'm kidding. My kingdom is more prosperous because we do not use oak wood. Fuck. Oh yes, you can visit anytime. Yes. It's totally not very small right now, but it's it's. Okay. Oh my gosh, there's so much dirt I have to clear out to make some fucking proper space. Oh my gosh, my neck is starting to kind of hurt. That happens sometimes when I'm playing games. I like shrimp. I shrimp way too hard, and my posture gets fucked. My posture is always fucked. I mean, but I'm very shrimp. I'm very shrimp right now. Snow Globe versus what's probably a hamster cage. It is not a hamster cage. It is not a hamster cage. It's a beautiful castle surrounded by a field with a village surrounded by a field of lovely clovers. Hence the name of Cloverfield Kingdom. So it is not a hamster cage, but there may be a room in my castle that resembles a hamster cage. I am not one to disclose that fact. And maybe sometimes I drink from a large water bottle affixed to the wall. But I am not one to disclose that. And maybe there's a little wheel for exercise as well. But like I said, it's in my castle, and there's a village on the there's a village outside of it, so it's not just a hamster cage. It's a kingdom. All right. I might look up some inspiration for the house, but I don't know because I like to freehand it. But because I have an image in my head of what I wanted this to look like, but it usually never comes out that way. It's just like with art. It's just this. It's the same as with art. Like you have the perfect image in your head and you picture it beautifully, and then you try to do it, and it looks like it looks not good. It looks not good. That's supposed to, yeah, that's true. That's true. Bullshitting is part of the process. I'm almost out of dirt. I might have to get more dirt. Man, this is taking so long. Building is the fun part, though. I mean, this is also alright. It's kind of relaxing, honestly, like listening to the music. I just wish it would play more. Like, sometimes the game goes silent and then I get sad. Okay, so now we can start. So, okay, I'm gonna put some stuff in my backpack here. I'm just gonna toss it, and then I'm gonna grab some of this aspen, and I'm gonna make. Well, actually, no, hold on. I want to use. I think I'm gonna use either spruce or dark oak for the roof. But I'm gonna use the log version, so I may need to get more dark oak. Which was over here. Sorry, over here, near the village over here, which is. But then they're gonna have to trek all the way over there. I mean, I could just go. It's not too far. It's not too far. It's just a little bit of climbing. I think okay, I make more axes and then I'll head over there. But I will. Well, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna start on the foundations as well. I'm gonna start on the foundation. So I'm gonna get some aspen here. Start on the foundation of the house here. I'm gonna do like a floor type thing. So this is gonna be where the I'm gonna have like a deck. I think it's called. Yeah, that's the word, deck. So the deck's gonna be right here. Oh gosh. Alright, maybe if I move it out this way. I was gonna originally have it going this way, like the house part, but I might not be able to because there is not enough room. So, I remember aspen looking almost like strawberry. Yeah, no, that's normal. That's a. Oh boy. Okay, I dropped some frames. I'd seen this. But we're good. We're good. Stream's still going. No, yeah, you're right. But it's okay. It's very pretty though. That's why I like this wood. It's not like, you know, it's not like the real world counterpart, but it's okay. Alright, I guess I'm gonna have to cut into the mountain a little more. Or the hill. It's not really a mountain, is it? It's more like a hilly area. But yeah, it's probably not accurate to its real world counterpart, but that's fine. Because I don't think cherry wood is pink IRL too, so I don't think cherry tree wood is pink. From what I recall. Those letters were very pretty. No, I like this color a lot. It's very pretty. There's no aspen in vanilla Minecraft. This is like a modded one, so that's maybe why. Unless you're talking about the real world counterpart. So, all right. So it's gonna be like this size for now. I think like it's gonna be very basic. It's gonna be very basic. Also it's getting dark, so I'll sleep soon. Yeah, no, this is a vanilla. This is not vanilla. This is modded. A modded wood type. It's nice. It's from. I was probably thinking birch. Yeah, no, birch is like a light. It's like a white color. It's like a light color. Birch is this one. It's like this color right here. A clover patch. Yes. I need to take a big stretch. Whoa. I'm okay. Sometimes when I stretch, I get like a little dizzy. I don't know if that's normal. I don't know if that's like a sign of something or if that's normal. Maybe not normal. Maybe it is. I don't know. But sometimes I get really dizzy when I stretch. It's really funny. Okay. Look at the sun coming in through the trees over there. That's very pretty. Blah. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna make some, I'm gonna make some stairs on the... What I like to do is I like to start the house, like, by the front. Like, what I do with when I'm making houses in Minecraft is, like... Bro, no, no, Minecraft doesn't make me dizzy. Stretching makes me dizzy. Stretching, when I stretch too hard, I get dizzy for some reason. And I don't know why. I don't know why. So what I want to do... Okay, ignore... That stairs... well, actually, that's not gonna... Oh, okay. What I want to do is Yeah, no. Yeah, no, it's okay. Actually, do I want to use spruce? Because spruce is probably easier to get. No. I'll just go to the dark forest. Actually, no, hold on. I want to see what color looks better with the aspen, actually. Because it might... Spruce might... No, spruce looks actually pretty nice. But where is there... There should be spruce somewhere. Oh, gosh. It's okay. It's over there. Yeah. Spruce might be a little more annoying to get. Let's see how the dark oak looks. My inventory is a fucking mess. The light of the aspen looks like... It does! It's very pretty. It's very pretty. Okay, I think I'll just go... I think... Let's see here. Dark oak. How does that look? About the same. Whichever one is easier to get. Whichever one is easier to get. I think right now it's dark oak, so... So I'm gonna build it like this. I want to have it like... So that's where in the... Okay, and then I want like the door... And I think I might make the door out of cherry, because the cherry wood door is very cute. I like the cherry wood door. Okay. And if I had... Okay, if I had Mizuno's on the, there's a really pretty... There's, gosh, sorry. Words. The glass... The, Actually, you know what? I should have Mizuno's downloaded on my computer. So let me find it real quick. It's somewhere. It's in the Modern app profiles. It's in the Modern app profiles. It's here. Okay. I just need to copy it from another thing here. Okay, Mizuno 16 craft. Oops, didn't mean to copy that. Mizuno 16 craft. And then I just copy that. Copy that. I just copy that here. Okay, and then I press done, and then I go to resource packs, and then it should be here. There it is. Okay. Yes, I want to load this scrap pack. Alright, so the thing is, I just hope this doesn't, like, make my game go really slow. Please do not crash my game from changing a texture pack. Please don't do this to me. Please don't fucking do this to me. Because sometimes it does that, and it's very annoying. Come on, you can do it. You can do it. Come on. I really need this. I need this. Speed. Speed, I need this. Mojang, I need this. If it crashes, then that's fine. It just gets really fucking annoying. Come on. Load faster. It always does this. It always does this. I don't know why. I guess because it's like loading all the textures and stuff. But it's very annoying. Okay, there we go. Thank you. Okay. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this! Yes, it worked! Yes, it worked. Okay, I love how this texture pack looks. I love how this texture pack looks so much. It's so fucking cute. Look at the armor in it. Look at the armor! Wow! It's so pretty. Okay. Alright, we're good. So as I was saying, the light gray stained glass pane is really cute, and I need to figure out how to make it. So it's just okay, light gray. How do I make light gray dye? Okay, I need to find oxide daisies, white tulip. Okay, that's not too bad. But as you can see here, the light gray stained glass is like a white window pane, which is really cute. So I need to. Okay, so that's how it's made. I can. Okay, this might take a bit though. But I need to just find. Okay, so these make purple. These also make purple. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn all the flowers that I have into, this should make white dye. Yeah, that makes white dye. I'm gonna turn some of the flowers I have into the dye to see if any of them. So I'm gonna I'd give up and pull up creative. I could do that, but I'm not gonna, because I do have those enabled, but I'm not gonna do that. I've done it before though, but I really do want to try building more in survival because it's fun. But I have done it before. Alright, where's all my dark oak? Oh, I must have put it away in here. Strong hamster, yes. I will be a strong hamster. Okay, so I want to do that. I'm just building up the foundation here right now. Like I said, it's gonna be a very small cottage. So yeah. Well, I might expand it later on. Hold on, I have an idea actually. So it's gonna look small from the outside here, but it's gonna be like more, I guess, on the I don't want to say wide, but the long side. Okay, it suits you. I am very strong. I'm very strong. I need to do something about this. But yes, I absolutely love how this texture pack looks. It is so cute. Okay. Like the aspen looks the same because it's, you know, it's from a mod. So it's gonna look, but the cherry actually is very close in color with Mizuno's to the aspen. So I could just use cherry wood. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Hold on. If it's right over there, I could use that instead of dark oak. I could do that. I could do that. I could actually do that. And then I could use the cherry log instead of dark oak because it's got this like nice. I mean, let me see how that looks. Let me see how that looks. It's got like a nice pinkish to it, but no, I want to go with the brown. I want to go with the brown actually. I'm gonna go with the dark oak brown. I like it. All right. Okay. So then I'm gonna put here. And then it's here. Okay. Cool. And then brown and pink, is it an elite? It is an elite color combo. Exactly. All right. I'm gonna have my window like, I'm gonna have a window like right here. It's gonna be like a 4x4 or no, a 2x2. Sorry, I can count. I can count. I'm gonna go grab some more dark oak in a bit. I'm just laying out like the very basic foundation because like what I do is I kind of like chisel into the house or whatever. Whatever I like, if I need to, whatever I need. Yeah. I mean, actually, no, I do need to get more dark oak. Right. So I think about this height is good for now, and then I'm gonna add like a roof. But what I'm gonna do is the roof is gonna be like, you'll see. I'm gonna do it out of slabs and stuff. Oh, that's cherry. Oopsies. I had cherry wood. It looks very similar. Okay. Oh no. It looks very fuck, what have I done? Okay. It looks very similar in color. So that was my bad. Yeah, I need to be careful. Oh my god, did I seriously? No, it was not intentional. It was not intentional. I didn't realize I had it equipped. It just looks very similar in color, but the texture is different, and also it's like a slightly different shade. Alrighty. Okay, so then I want to make okay. It's very basic right now, but you'll see. You'll see what I'm gonna do. Okay. Alright, so I'm gonna head over to the dark oak forest and... Oh, I have an idea though. Oh, I only have one. Where's my wool? I should have some more wool, shouldn't I? Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna make a sleeping bag. So now I don't now when I sleep, it's not gonna reset my spawn. Let me put all this stuff away. Actually, put the stone cutter down. Just why not? I'm gonna put all this stuff away. I have steak on me, so I'm good on that. I am running out of space though. No, it's not in vanilla, unfortunately. That's why I have it installed, because it's very useful. I wish the sleeping bag was in vanilla. God, I wish it was, but it's not, unfortunately. Okay. Alright. I am going to go to that dark oak forest again. I'm just gonna set up a temporary waypoint. It's not too far away, is it? No. No, okay. Let's go. So, okay, the otter must have killed the koi fish. There's a drown chasing after me right now, and I don't know why. There's fucking drowns spawning in the river. That's great. Oh no. Oh, that might be why. Oh, that might... No, why is it suddenly raining? Okay, I thought... It says it's during thunderstorms. Never needing to use cords again. Yeah, I never did anyways. So, you know, it's very useful. It's very useful for me. Also, I've been seeing we have had some drop frames, but not too many, which is really good. You know, it's to be expected with my computer as it is right now. Hopefully though, if soon enough, this is exciting news, I'm gonna be getting a new computer. Well, not new. It's a hand-me-down from my sibling. But they are giving me their old computer from like 2018, but it has like way better specs than the one I'm currently using, so. Okay. Wait a minute. This was stupid. There's a zombie right there. Whoa! Did you see that? Did you see that? I'm surprised the game even let me sleep though, because I thought it would have hit me with the "you can't sleep now, there are monsters nearby" thing, but it didn't. So I'm good. It's still fucking chasing me though. I did. Yeah. I bet. You did. I don't like being in the dark of war. It's scary! There's monsters that spawn here. There's monster. They're monster. And they can fucking jump scare me. I mean, the spiders should be peaceful now because it's daytime, but I don't know if it's the same. If the same is for Dark Oak Forest, so I could be wrong. At least these are giving me like a shit ton of wood though, so I don't really need to oh boy, okay. My pickaxe is almost dead, but I think I'm good on wood now. I'm gonna use it one more time. I'm gonna use it one more time. One more time. For a fat tree. Strong hamster. I can beat the monsters. You're right. I'm a strong hamster and I'm so freaking powerful. Like, it's crazy. I'm such a strong freaking hamster. Okay. Alright, let's go back to home. I think next Minecraft stream I do, I'm gonna re-add some mods that I like. Such as, I'm thinking about adding Trek, which adds like a bunch of generated structures, but I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. What else? There's like another mod. I don't really know the name of it, but it's in a server I play that adds like a really huge, these really fucking huge dungeons. I don't know which one what it's a part of, but they're crazy. I could look it up actually. I could look it up. But it adds these like crazy huge dungeons with like really strong monsters. But like the only thing about them is that they're kind of everywhere. So I wonder if there's like an option in the thing to make it like spawn less. Anyways, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Look at the otters, by the way. Look at that. Oh, they're hunting for fish. Oh. All right. The drowned seems to be gone, which is nice. Ow. Oh, I was drowning. I didn't even realize. Yeah. Yeah, there's otters. Otters are not in vanilla Minecraft, which is sad. But it's okay. It's okay. Alright, I think I can start now moving some of this stuff to my inventory. I mean my house. Sorry, not my inventory. Where's my oh, right, my pickaxe is gone. I use it up. I gotta make a lot of pickaxes. A lot of axes, sorry. That's the word. Axe. Is there there's probably a model with penguins. There probably is a model with penguins, yeah. Okay. Alright, so the only thing I wish I had right now is scaffolding, which I need from bamboo. And that's like really fucking annoying to find, so I'm not gonna even bother. I'm not even gonna bother right now because I don't want to deal with that. Okay, so we should have enough dark oak for the roof, so I'm gonna turn some into planks. Ooh, those are really interesting. Okay, so they're like black in this texture pack, but it should still look fine. Oops. Yeah, it's still like a brown color. Oh, I don't know what I wanted to do. Well, slightly. Anyways, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do like a slabs roof, like something like this, and then I'm gonna go up there, and I'm just gonna poke out some holes here for the windows. But I don't have scaffolding, and I don't think there's a bamboo. It's like a dark brown, yeah. And there's not like I don't think there's a bamboo forest anywhere nearby, which I need like bamboo for the scaffolding, so. Which helps me build, but yeah, that's very cute. Okay, and then I'm gonna go up there. I guess I'll just use dirt for now. I'm gonna go up there and fix that a little as well. I do need more slabs though. Hold on. Alright. Okay. Oh, I'm also gonna make some stairs as well. Hold on. There we go. Okay, that should be enough for now. And then I'm gonna do the rest of the roof with just planks. So, all right, let me get some dirt to get up there. I already have dirt in the chest, but I don't care. All right, this should be enough. But yeah, having scaffolding would be very, very helpful because then I wouldn't have to do that. All right. I'm gonna have to like figure this out, how I want this to look. Something like this kind of. What I wish is I wish I could like just like hold on. I'm just gonna do this for like a quick sec. Come on. Okay. It's fine. You know what? I don't even care anymore. I'm just gonna do the roof in creative mode. Just because it's easier this way, like to fix things up. But that's all. I'm not gonna get the glass in creative. Oh, hold on, I want to do this. I wish there was like a way to fly in base game Minecraft, so something like that. And I'm gonna put a fence post there, a dark oak fence post. But you could. I don't want to though. I don't want to. I'm just gonna do the roof in creative, because the roof is always the most annoying part. Because if I rely too much on creative, then it's gonna just not be cool. All right. Okay. All right. Now let's go back. Let's see how this looks actually. If I want to do this, like. All right. Cool. All right. Now let's go back into survival. There we go. All right, I just wanted to fix up that part, and that's it. I like this music that's playing a lot right now. I'm not really sure what it is. If I had scaffolding, which I don't, but I'm gonna search for some probably eventually, then it would make things a lot easier, but I don't have it. Okay, and now I think, so what I want to do is I'm going to add like a fence post up here. Ow. And also I think what I also want to do is like kind of like this. It's very small. It's a very small kilo cabin. It's very small. Yeah, it would be really good for an outdoor area. Okay, now I can get rid of this. Over here. And I wanted to add like a second floor as well, so I might do that as well. Because I should have enough aspen for that and enough dark oak for that. Put the cherry planks away! I don't... That's not... I wanted to add like a small little second floor, I think. So... right here. Maybe for like the bedroom or something. That'd be cute. It's very small, as you can see. Yeah, I could do like the bedroom up here. That'd be really cute. Like I have a little ladder going up. And what I want to do is I want to grab some like leaves as well and like put them in the outskirts. I just realized I have a resource pack for better looking leaves. I don't know why I didn't have that on. I'm stupid. Oh great, wait, no, just because oh no, I turned it on, so now it's gonna take forever to load. Ah! It's okay. It's not gonna take as long as Mizuno's, I bet though. Because it's just leaves. So. Oh, Prince, thank you for the follow. I just noticed my follow alerts don't work for some fucking reason, and I don't know why. I don't know why they don't work sometimes. It's really annoying, but it's okay. It's okay. Okay, there we go. There we go. All right, hold on. I just need to do something real quick on my phone, real quick. Yeah, no, it's okay. I always notice that as well. It's like it's really easy to forget. Where is the post? Okay, there it is. All right. Sometimes I retweet my live now thing just to so other people can see that I'm live. Anyways, all right. See, as you can see, okay, that froze my game a little loading. But as you can see over there, the leaves have like texture to them now. I guess I don't really know. I don't know how to explain it. All right, so I want this to be like a very small area, small bedroom. So it's gonna like, you know, you'll see. And I'm gonna try not to go into creative for the roof on this one. I'm gonna try not to. Because then that leads into like a thing of like relying way too much on creative mode. So I wanna do that. And then I'm gonna do like that, and then like, oops, hold on. Like that. And then I'm gonna do the roof in no, I might not have enough dark oak slabs. Okay, you know what? You know what? I just need to okay. I didn't have enough dark oak slabs, so I had to do that. Okay. We're fine. Okay. I just hope this looks okay from the outside. I'm sure it'll look fine. I'm gonna use my sleeping bag because I don't want it to be too dark, because then the scary monsters are gonna kill me. Okay. It's fine. I'm not like fucking, I'm not doing like a speed run or anything. Actually, do I want to do like a, so I could do, oh, wrong way. I'm not gonna do a fence post. I'm gonna do like a stairs like there. All right, and then what? Oh, that's gonna look interesting. That's gonna look, hold on. It's gonna look a little barren. I'll put some stairs here, and then some over here as well, and some on the. I don't know what to do on the back side as well. Nah. Nobody fucking cares. Nobody look at the backside of the house. It sucks. Okay. How does that look? Oh, that's so cute. I need to fix the roof up there a little, so fuck it. I hate doing this to myself, but I'm just doing like small minor tweaks in creative, so it's fine. It's fine. It's just for building. I'm not gonna really do this for anything else, probably. Okay, I'm still gonna get the glass in survival though. So, yeah. Give into creative mode. I don't want to give into it too much. So then I feel like I'm fucking cheating. Even though it's my game and I can do whatever I want, so. Yeah. Alright. Okay. So that's fine. That's fine. It's cute. Oh, the floor. Yeah, the floor is, the floor is fine. There's white patches? What do you mean? Oh, that's just sand. Yeah. That's just sand. It's fine. Alright, where are my torches? Okay, they must be outside. It looks like a, oh, that's, yeah, it does kind of look like a little walkway. Where are my torches? Do I really only have 9 torches? Huh. Okay. Fine. I want to put some light in here, just so, okay. And then, as for the, okay, will that lead up there? Yeah. Alright, I'm gonna, like, have, like a ladder going right here. How do you make a ladder again? Okay. I just need, like, a few ladders. Like that. And then the bed's gonna go right here. So let me grab that bed. Oh, if I do a double, damn it, it's gonna be fucking off center. I'll just do like that, so I can look out the window when I wake up. Anyways. Oh yeah, I gotta cover that up. I made a hole. Okay, alrighty. Now it comes for the fun part, which is transporting everything from the chest back here into the house, which is great. So I'm just gonna fucking do this the way that I do it. Which is, okay, this is the stupid way. I just need to keep going until I get a chest. Hold on. Oh, there you go. Okay. 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 And then I will pick everything up. Oh. Get out of here. Okay. Alright. Chests, I was originally, so later on I'm gonna make like a basement area for storage and stuff, but for now, I'm just gonna put everything away in these chests here. This is gonna take a bit. I mean, I could use my backpack to store some stuff, but it's fine. I also need to put all the stuff in my bag. Okay. You should make a back. Oh, that'd be. You know what? Well, nah, I don't need to. What I was gonna do is I was gonna add on to the house later on, but later. Not right now. I love this color of wood. It's so pretty. It's like a salmony, like a pink. It's very close to the cherry wood. What? Oh, that's the book. Okay. I picked up the fucking hamster book. A wealth of hamster knowledge at your fingertips. No, it's fine. It's okay. It's okay. Hamster knowledge. I already have a bunch of hamster knowledge because I am a hamster. So it's all good. Okay, there we go. Now we got everything. We got everything. I'm also gonna carve out a window spot over here as well. Right here. Where's all my meat? There it is. Okay. Alright, now we're good. Okay. I gotta stretch. I gotta stretch a little bit. My neck is always killing me when I play Minecraft. I don't know why! Okay. Wow. Okay. And now I need to find. Okay. So now that we have our house established, which is very cool, I need to get sand and gray dye. So there's some sand right here. You're simping too much. I'm trying not to. I'm trying not to. Okay. So there's the closest place with a lot of sand right there is the beach. Also, I gotta get rid of these death. these death markers. Oh wait, no, sorry. There's some sand over there, which is nice. I'm sitting up. It's just so hard to sit up while I'm playing a game because I'm short. So, oh wait, no, it's because I'm sometimes like, it's weird. Clove mustn't invest in those posture plushies. I don't know what those are, but those sound good. They sound nice. Alright, I'm just gonna get rid of this little beach here, I guess. I have like a plan for this area over here later. Oh, it's so pretty from afar. I also, what I want to do is I want to make some shears so I can get some leaves. You haven't? You should say, no, I have not. I have not heard of them. No, I have not heard of the posture plushies. What I should do though is I was gonna make some shears and then get some leaves to put on the outside the house. It's gonna be really pretty. I also add, I think, what the fuck? You dickhead. Hold on, you must die. Okay, why are you fucking spawning down here? Oh. What the fuck? Did you check out? No, I cannot, sorry. Why do you do so much damage? What the hell? Oh my god, there's multiple of you. No, they cannot be spawning down here. No, that's not cool. Ow. Did he drop his trident? No. Oh, there's so many. Oh, no, I'm drowning. Okay, well, that's why. Oh, there's another one. What the fuck? This is not cool. Oh, man. Oh. These are the fun part about, making your house on a river is all the fucking drown that spawn. Fucking asshole. Okay, it's gone. Oh, it did drop the trident though. Cool. Anyways, as I was saying, I need to expand the land here, but slow water. Yeah, they suck. They suck. I know in one of the recent updates they made it so that they spawn less, but I'm not on that version. They updated it so that they don't spawn as much in like rivers and stuff. But they do. I mean they do in this version, which sucks. It's because of the light level and water being like not the best. So it makes me a little sad. Yeah, they're probably gonna spawn a bunch near my house. Which is fine, I guess. Whatever. It's just that sometimes they spawn with tridents and then they skewer me like that. So it sucks. Alright, it's getting dark. Okay. Anyways, as I was saying, my journey is gonna be to get some oxeye daisies. I got a clam. Oh, I need to smelt this glass. I need to put this in the furnace before I sleep. My plan is to get some oxeye daisies to make some gray dye, or whatever other flowers make gray dye as well. Because there's a bunch of different modded plants and such. So I just need to figure out where those plants spawn. Okay. I need to make more torches as well, though. Grab some of this. Cool. Okay. Allium makes purple dye, so if I go, sorry, gray with an A. If I go for light gray dye is oxeye daisy, azure bluet, and white tulips. But there's also probably other flowers as well that are modded in that aren't showing up, so. Let's go. Ooh. Looks interesting over there. I want to see what's over there. We're also going to be exploring. Oh, I should have made a boat. Shit. Let me go make a boat. Oh, and some shears. I should also make some shears. Man, there's so much I forget to do. Shears. Okay, I'm gonna take the iron with me. And I'm gonna make a boat. Cool. Okay. I might have to BRB in a sec though, because I have to use the bathroom. So 1 second, everybody. I will be right back. And we are back. Okay, sorry about that. Alright. Okay, so, what were we doing? Right. I was gonna go look for light gray dye. I'm gonna put some of this stuff away I don't need on my hand. Welcome back. Hello! I was not gone for very long. Okay, so I have steak and bread, but do I have any other food that I could take with me? Will you do our fight this year? I'm gonna try to do it. But like no, what's the word? No guarantees. God, I'm so bad with coming up with words, with figuring out words. All right. Anyways, I wanted to head over there. But yeah, ew, the Twitch emojis. Yeah, no, you sorry. They're gonna be there. But yes, I will try to do art fight, but no guarantees. But I did upload myself to art fight. I'm just using a different account though than the one associated with my Twitch stream. I would love for there to be emotes of myself, but I need to get to affiliate. And honestly, that's probably not too far off because I'm already almost at 25 followers, I think, on Twitch. Let me check. How many followers do I have? 25. I am at 25. Okay. But I still need to have the hardest part of getting affiliate is the viewership thing, which can be really annoying. Oh, wait, hold on. Oxide Daisy! Perfect! Alright, I just need like a few of these to make into light gray dye. What the fuck? I don't think that's supposed to be happening to the pigs. Oh. Yeah, that's not supposed to be happening. Which pack could be doing that? Maybe it's Modern Mizunos? It might be Modern Mizunos, let me see. That's really fucking funny. Because I saw like a similar thing happen to my friend where she was using a resource pack and the cow was like fucked up. So that can happen. If it's not Modern Mizunos, then I'll figure it out. But that was really funny. It might also be in one of the mods as well, like maybe the fresh animation. Okay, no, it was Modern Mizunos. That was it. I figured it out. Okay, this is the same village. Oh, okay, another one. Nice. Alright, I'm gonna turn these flowers in my inventory into light gray dye. I'm gonna need quite a bit of light gray dye though, is the thing, so. The good news is that there are quite a lot of these around, so that's good. And not too far off from home, so that's good. So that's also good. Are these allium? Allium, yeah. Allium are very pretty in Minecraft. Okay, alright, there's some more over there. I think they can also spawn in the oh, game stuttered a little. But I'm glad I fixed the animal issue. That was a little scary. Oh gosh, it's stuttering a little over here, which is great. Probably because of the petals. Because of the flower petals. Like the falling leaves and stuff. Or falling petals. Okay, no, I don't see any around here. I think they're more like, oh, is that an apple orchard tree? Is that an orchard? Orchard? I think it's an orchard tree right there. Cute little flower box, yeah. Oh, there's a house over here. What are you doing so far away from everyone else? Also, the villagers are very cute in Mizunos. Look at this guy! Oh my god, he's like a little cat! That is so freaking cute. That is so fucking cute. But I want to check out that Zelkova forest over there. It interests me because it's like blue and red trees. They're little critters. Yeah. It interests me. It interests me. Ow. Also, if you notice, sometimes animals pop in. That's just because I have like a thing on for simulation distance, so they kind of spawn like a little. I mean, they don't spawn. Sorry, they show up. They pop in a little late, but it's okay. It's just because my computer is not the best, like I said. Ooh, red pretty trees. One of my favorite things to do in modern Minecraft is to explore. Also, I'm gonna take some of these the oak leaves. This tree is bald now. I'm taking some of these for the house because I want to put them around. It's gonna be very pretty and cool. If I could find like a flowering oak, from oh god, no, wait, that was Biomes of Plenty, isn't it? Damn it. Well, I guess not. So, okay, what color is this one gonna be? I probably didn't need to chop down the whole tree. Oh, it's like an orangey. Ooh, that's very like autumny. There's some strawberries here. Do the bushes hurt? No, they do not. I'm gonna take these. So the strawberry bushes in Flora it is. I don't have that mod installed. But the strawberry bushes in Flora hurt you. As well as the pineapple bushes in that mod as well. I guess it's realistic because if you've ever... No, that's pink dye. If you've ever touched a, If you've ever touched a strawberry bush, because we grew strawberries last year, it's fucking pokey. It hurts. It'll hurt you. The same goes with pumpkins as well. I did not realize this, but when you're trying to grow pumpkins, we didn't successfully grow any pumpkins, unfortunately. We tried. But when you're trying to grow pumpkins, the roots are very spiky, have like thorns on them, and it hurts. And it's very hard to like try to clean them up as well, because you need to like wear gloves and shit. But I didn't know this. I did not know this until I was growing, until we tried to grow fruits and stuff, fruits and plants and stuff. Why are the plants fighting back? Exactly. But unfortunately this year, none of the plants really survived the winter, which is unfortunate. So they're all gone. And I haven't really checked back there, but it's very overgrown and unmaintained. So yeah. Yeah, we grew strawberries and they were nice. I mean, they were pretty small for strawberry, because you know the strawberries you can buy at the store are very like, oh, sky. What the fuck is a sky? I'm sorry, I'm exploring right now. I'll delete this one. The strawberries that you get in the market are very much like genetically modified, so they're like huge and perfect and stuff, but not the ones you grow at home. The one you grow at home can be a lot smaller. I did really like the peppers that we grew. We grew these nice like spicy yellow peppers. They're very good. But yeah, like I said, everything's kind of dead now, and I don't think anything's gonna... Whoa, look at this place. I don't think anything's gonna survive, unfortunately. Look at this grass. This is pretty. Don't they taste better when they're teen year? Actually, yeah, kinda. Yeah. This is pretty. What kind of wood is this? Skyrus log. Ooh, it's like blue. Okay, I did not mean to destroy that. I'm gonna take this. Kind of reminds me of like the Aether. Like if anyone remembers the Aether mod. I'm sure a lot of people remember the Aether mod actually. But it reminds me of that. Look at these beautiful trees. Wow. What are these other blue ones here too? Are these just oak with blue spruce with blue spruce leaves? Interesting. This is a very pretty modded biome. Hello, leaf insect. Yeah, I'm just kind of exploring at this point until I want to go back. In that case, I will drown myself. Or if I find another waypoint, then we'll be good. Or my when my inventory gets full. Skyrus vine, interesting. They look like little worms. I don't think I like that very much. Oh fuck, I forgot I'm supposed to be looking for gray dye. For like gray dye as well. What dye does this make? That makes purple, okay. This should be pink. These fox gloves, these make cyan? Okay, interesting. Interesting. These fairy slippers are gonna make pink dye for sure. That's a leaf insect. That is not that's a bug. What's over there? Oh gosh, I'm seeing all these biomes I haven't seen yet, because they didn't spawn in the other world in the server I'm in for some fucking reason. Oh, it's getting dark. There's a lot of really pretty ones. Oh, blueberries. There's some blueberries here. Gotta be careful though, because they hurt. They hurt me. The little one? No, the little ones don't hurt. Okay, that's good to know. Oh, there's some palm wood here as well. Overgrown dacite. Palm. Oh, this is from Let's Do Beach Party. I forgot I have that on. Yes. There's like some really cool beach stuff. Let me sleep. Okay. Oh god, I forgot I have so many like cooking mods and stuff. I can't wait to make myself like a little kitchen in my house. Maple taiga. Oh, that's like a very small maple taiga over there. I just need some more gray flowers. I'm going very far from home for this. I could have probably looked around the area near my house, but I didn't want to because I wanted to see what the fuck was over here, and there's a lot of really cool stuff over here, so it's fine. What I do want to find is a desert, though, because deserts are very useful. Oh, wait, hold on. Maybe these make... Do these make white dye or gray dye? White dye. Okay. And I'm assuming these don't make anything. No, those are just clovers. Oopsies. Wild nettle. Wait, what can I do with wild nettle? Because that's from Farm and Charm. Probably nothing. And then there's lollipop flowers. Yellow daffodil. Okay, that's gonna make yellow probably. It looks pink, doesn't it? Yeah, it makes yellow. Oh, that's just carrots. Ah! Oh, green bean. I'll take some green bean seeds as well because I need to make a I need to. Oh, wait. I think there's some. Okay, I thought there would be in this biome. There would be some oxidazes and stuff. Maybe ribwort. No. Your stream is so nice. I'm getting sleepy. That's fair. But I hope I'm not like boring you to sleep. That would not be nice. But I'm assuming you mean it's very relaxing. Yeah. I can be chill. I mean, I talk like I'm a yapper. But, you know, I talk like I say a million things at a second. It's not boring, it's comforting. Okay, good. There's a windswept savanna over there. Ooh. It won't be very comforting when I go into a cave, will it? No, I'm kidding. I don't want to go over there. It seems like really annoying. Geronimo! Seems really annoying to traverse in that area, so I'm gonna go this way. Where's my boat? Really need to find the flowers. Where? Well. Oh man, where are the gray flower? Where are the gray dye flowers? Give me them. Give it to me, Rachel. Give it to me, Rachel. Ooh, this is very, ooh. I don't want these. No. Ah! I've slept to some yappers. No, that is fair. That is very fair. I try not to fall asleep during streams, but I mean, I might have like once or twice. I don't know. I don't know. Each leather flower. It's pretty. It'll probably give me pink. Yeah. Cattail sprout. Yeah, I don't think I'm gonna find any fluorescent cattail. That's pretty. What biome is this? Cypress wetlands. This is very, very pretty. Wow. I'm going F1 and just like fucking walk around. This is so pretty. Oh my gosh. This is so pretty. So fucking cool. But it doesn't have the flowers I need. Orchard. Oh, there's a prairie over there. Maybe that'll have some. Maybe. I'm just fucking running over all these lily pads. What is this? Flowering tiny lily pads. Interesting. And all this, like, I'm assuming that it says water soak, but it's probably like algae. Probably something like that. I'm just gonna hold on to these, actually. Just for now. Just if I want to put them in the river where my house is. Oh, this is the prairie. Okay, it's... God damn it. There's not gonna be any... It's just fucking prairie grass. Yeah. Oh, I don't want to go... I don't want to go to the ocean. Sunflower... Ooh, sunflower plants. That sounds cool. Sunflower. I wonder why... Because these are base Minecraft sunflowers. So when I hover over it says adorable hamster pets, but sunflowers are base Minecraft. So I'm assuming it just overrid it for some reason, and I don't know why. Oh, but I should grab some sunflowers, shouldn't I? I should grab some for my house. I just hope that... Oh, but they're not going to be facing in the right direction for my house. They're probably not going to be facing in the right direction. I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm also going to grab some of these other flowers as well. For my house, you should, because they're always going to be facing in the direction of the Minecraft sun, like when it rises and stuff. They get solar power. Okay. Oh, haha. Yes. Okay, this is a good biome. This is a good biome. Oh man, I could have just checked the allium shrubland near my house. It's fine. I explored. I explored quite a bit. What's that critter up there? That was a ferret. A ferret. Sorry, not a ferret. Ferret's a Pokemon. That was a ferret. Which are also not vanilla Minecraft, but they're very cute. They're from Critters and Companions. Okay. I was wrong. I thought there would be more more okay. I only found 2. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Tisk tisk tisk. Oh, bayou. Ooh. This looks a little scary. Why are daisies so hard to find? I don't know. Don't know. I just need to find the fucking oxide daisy or the bluette flower. They're very annoying to find, and I don't know why. Ooh. The bayou. Ugh. Ow. Maybe I can find some gray flowers here. That's violet. Fuck! It was very pretty here though, so I can't complain. It's just that I just hope it's not too long of a stretch of a biome. I just need to find some freaking flowers. Please give me them. Please. There's a, it says river on my map, but yeah, that's more allium shrubland, and from what I know, that they don't have the daisy. Oh wait, I just realized I do have an oxide daisy, so I have 11. I need more though. I need way more for my house, probably. So wait, I might not. But I still want to explore a little more, and then we can go back. So let's go this way. Cause I like exploring. I like exploring, and I like looking around. It's very pretty. It's very pretty. Hello, little frogs. Hello, little froggy. Hello, You're so cute. Look at you. Ah, your big eyes. Ah, so cute. Wow. Oh, there's more allium shrublands. That's great. I don't really need that. I just need a new biome to explore. Oh my god. I love them. They're so freaking cute. If you bring them into the Nether and they swallow a magma cube, then you can get a that's how you get a frog light. Maybe there'll be some in this orchard biome. Orchard. Is it orchard or orchard? Or whatever. No, I think. Wait, hold on. I think orchid is like the flower, and orchard is the like the biome. A frog light. Yeah, it's like a different type of light. It's pretty. Orchard, yeah. That makes sense. It's like, oh. Hold on. Oh. Okay, that's not gonna work. I'll just look up light. These ones, these frog lights here. Yeah, you can only get them via that very specific thing that you do. Okay. Alright. I think it's time we head back, so... okay, well that didn't kill me. I just think of Applejack, it helps. That does help, that didn't kill me. Maybe I can just drown or something in this very shallow river. Hold on, I got an idea. This works. There we go. Okay. Alright. Okay. Now we should be able to make. Now we should be finally able to make the glass. Are you still fucking smelting? It's because Okay, how much? So that makes 8. What actually? Wait, hold on. What I want to do is I want to the panes. I want to make glass pane first. And I think, yeah, okay, all right, yeah, we had enough. We had enough. You were so violent towards yourself. You know. Yeah. That is. Yes, I did it. Okay, now we sleep. I'm happy. I'm happy we have our house situated. Okay, now next step is I want to make like a little kitchen over like maybe right here. But the thing is that this is a bit in the way. So, but we can make like an oven. So, is it? No, it is an oven because I have Farmer's Delight on. No, wait. Where's the oven? Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Oh, wait, no, it's stove. It's stove. It's stove. So I need to make a stove, which is bricks, and I need to smelt some clay, so. Oh, wait, hold on. Actually, I can make the kitchen, like, right here if I just move these. You have the kitchen. I could do that. I have an idea. If I get some wood here and I put it like on the back here. Oh yes, I can do this. Yes, perfect. That could work. All right. Okay. So now I need to get some clay. So hopefully there's some clay in this river, but if not, then it's fine. In the back, steal some book. I don't know. All right. So clay. Clay. This is gravel. So clay. Clay is a little annoying to find. I think. Wait, is this clay? Oh, here's clay. Okay, there's some clay right here. We're good. And but the thing about clay is that it's very easy. Oh, I'm not meaning to destroy that dirt over there. The thing about clay in Minecraft is that it stacks up very fast. So bricks aren't like the worst thing to get. Sometimes I look for clay for so long, but you know it's not the hardest thing to find. Just fucking annoying because it spawns in rivers and stuff, and sea, and it spawns in like bodies of water, as it does in probably real life as well. It just, you know, I don't want to drown, so I gotta be careful when getting it. But it does stack up very easily, so that's good. Alright, so that's all the clay here, so I think that's enough. I could also... Actually, no, I don't know if you can put clay in a blast furnace. I would have thought it would spawn in deserts? No, that's terracotta. Terracotta spawns in deserts. Well, no, that spawns in Badlands, but, you know, same thing. Terracotta spawns in Badlands and, so other structures as well. I don't know. Okay. Oh, this fucking song. Hold on, this is my jam. Yes! Okay, so now that's smelting, so this is gonna take some time. But in the meantime, how to make a counter? That's not what I wanted to do. Toe. Counter. I don't want the DecoCraft ones, because the DecoCraft ones aren't, like, interactable, I guess. Let's see here. I don't want these ones, because those are, like, polished deep slate slabs. Oh, there is a brick counter. Oh, cabinet. Yeah, maybe cabinet? Oh, okay, here. There's like a one with a countertop. I don't want the counter. Here, I could just do the very basic oak cabinet. Or, sorry, whatever wood I have at least. Dark oak? Yeah, dark oak looks nice. And then I need to make a trapdoor. And cabinet. Oh, okay, I need to make some of these. Alright, I think 3 is good enough for now. Those are very cute. And then I can put stuff in them as well. Okay, got some bricks, so now I can make some. And then the stove is, yeah, I need 5 of them, so. And then I also need, some iron and then a campfire. Can I make a campfire again? It's coal and then logs and then sticks. Okay. Wait a minute. Oh, I just don't have coal on me right now. Hold on. That's my bad. Campfire. Alright. Oh. I thought the game crashed for a sec. It's like sometimes freezes and then I get scared. Which is completely understandable. So, okay. I'm excited to get started on like the deco craft stuff. It's gonna be really fun. Okay. Okay, just one more and I think we should be good. Okay, so, oh wait, I need iron, don't I? There we go. There's 2 stoves. I want the Farmer's Delight one. I like the Farmer's Delight one. Actually, what I'm gonna do, okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna put like one here. I'm gonna put it like right here. And I'm gonna put the cabinet right here. I can still access that one. It's just, you know, in the corner. All right, okay. And now I need to make a cutting board, which is very easy. So, got the cutting board right here. And then I need to make a knife as well. A knife. And here. Oh, that's weird. Interesting. Okay, I guess the advancements are a little fucky for Farmer's Delight, but where is it? Oh god. Yeah. So I got the knife thing. Okay, weird. Yeah, I don't know what's up with that. Now we can do okay, now we can cut things. So like meat and stuff. So if I put raw mutton on the cutting board and then I use a knife, nice. So we can do that. Oh, and then I'm gonna leave the knife there actually. Yeah. And then we need a cooking pot. So water bucket, okay. All right. Cut the cucumbers. No, the cucumbers, I need to plant them first. I need to make a little farm, okay? And then we'll get a hamster, okay? All right, and then, okay, more bricks I need, which I have cooking up. The cucumbers cannot be cut with Farmer's Delight, unfortunately. They're like, you just put them in your crafting table to be cut. They don't have mod compatibility with each other. Okay. All right, I don't need to do that. Okay, I need a shovel. A wooden shovel. And then I need to fill this bucket up with water. There we go. Just make sure that didn't make it like a weird gap. Okay. And I need 2 bricks. Me, I'm putting shovel in a pot. Alright. And then we just put the cooking pot there. And then we can cook now. So, yay! So there's a lot of recipes in this. So if I open up the recipe book, I can make a bunch of different stuff. It's really cool. Hello there, Choco Dearly Doe. Welcome, welcome. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Hello, hello. Okay, that's beef. All right. Tomato sauce, chicken soup, vegetable soup. And the more stuff I find, the more I can make, because I'm there's some recipes that are not here right now. So, yeah. Yay! Hold on. I know I can, I need to make dough in order to make pasta. So, how do I do that again? Right, okay, it's just wheat and some eggs. Well, I need to start on a farm for that. So, I think what I'm gonna... Okay, I thought I heard a fucking zombie or something. But I didn't. Alright, I need to make another... I'm gonna make one more cabinet, as well. Just, there we go. That's perfect now. That's our little kitchen. It's very cute. It's very quaint. It's not perfect, but it's cute. Alright. And I'm gonna make some bowls to put in the in here, because you need these for the thing right there, so in order to cook. So you can make ratatouille. I can make vegetable noodles, fried eggs. Oh, I need to make a frying pan as well. How do you make that? How to make a frying pan? Okay, well, I guess I'll have to look it up. Pan. Oh, wait, sorry, it's a skillet. I'm stupid. A skillet, and it's very easy to make. I can actually make it right now. I can fucking hit people with this? That is really funny. Alright, now the thing about the skillet is it also needs to be on a stove. So, I'm just gonna leave it there for now, though. Oh, it's dark. You know what mod I should have downloaded as well? Oh man, I completely forgot. I forgot to get the Joy of Painting mod, which lets you make like pictures and stuff. I think for next stream, for next Minecraft stream, I'm gonna add a few more mods for sure. Because, you know, I want to spruce things up. Alright, let's see which way this... Oh man! They're not facing the right direction, because it's fucking... The sun comes that way. That's too bad. Anyways, I need to make a hoe to start farming. Okay. And I'm gonna do it over here, because this is there's some space here. Clear out the area again. Eventually, I want to make like a greenhouse and stuff. We'll see. These things take some time. Okay. Right, okay, that should be enough space for now. Alright, now we can start tilling the area. And then planting some seeds and stuff. Right, I'll plant some carrots and stuff. Plant some carrots like that. There's my cucumbers. Plant some cucumbers for the hamsters so we can get our personal hamster army started. Do I have more? I have some wheat. I have some green bean seeds. The texture packs are so cute and clean. I know, I love it. I'm using Mizuno's right now, which is very cute. I fucking love Mizuno's. It is the cutest in the world. Okay. Alright. If I had, I don't have. Do I have any tomato seeds? Let me see. I might have some. No, I don't think so. I do have some wheat seeds though, so I can plant some wheat, and I can also plant some sugarcane as well. So that's good. And I'm wondering if Farm and Charm. Oh, okay, I got that achievement. I'm wondering if Farm and Charm. Do I have right-click harvest? I think I do. I mean, I might not actually. No, I don't. What was I gonna say? Okay. This is very pretty. Yeah, I'm gonna have to definitely download some mods off stream for next time, so. Alright, oh, I know what I can do now. I can put some oak leaves around my house to make it look like really extra pretty. I would add biomes of plenty, but I do not want to have like 2 biome mods going, because then it like makes. Okay, what the fuck? Whatever. I don't know what happened. It just kind of made sunflower seeds. Anyways, but I was gonna say, if I have 2 biome mods on, then it kind of gets like a little fucked up. So my computer is not the best. Unfortunately. I really need to get some scaffolding. That would help a lot with certain things. Yeah, no, I can't do that. Alright, I like the greenery around the house. It's very cute. Yes! It's very, very cute. Okay. So now we got a little farm going. And I can find some more seeds and stuff later on as well. Alright. It's looking awesome. Thank you! Thank you, thank you. I hope you're having a good day. I've been having a good day. I didn't really do much today though. I think after stream today, I might like try to design more stickers, because I really need to get on that. Because I have a convention coming up. So that's fun. I'm very excited for that actually. But it's just a lot of stress. I'm having a happy day. I'm super. Oh yeah, it's pretty warm here right now actually, which is nice. But I'm trapped inside because I'm home alone and I can't drive yet. My driving test is this Friday though. I'm very excited. I'm hoping that I can pass it. I believe in myself, but at the same time I'm very scared. Because I don't know if I can do it or not. I really hope so. I really want to be able to pass so I can finally have a license. Hamster on wheels! Yeah! I really want to finally have a license. Like, God, please. I'm so nervous though, because I know that I'm probably gonna fuck up a little, but I really hope it's like not. Where do I find rice? I really hope it's not like I don't fuck up too hard. Okay. I need to look up where you find rice in Farmer's Delight. Hold on. Because I want to get some for cooking. Farmer's Delight rice. Rice can be found growing in swamp and jungle biomes. Okay. Being nervous is better than not being right. It means you care for. Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true. Yeah. I'm sure I'll do my best. But even if I don't succeed, I can always just do it again. It's just the thing is that it costs money to try again, which kind of sucks. But it's fine. It'll be fine. It'll all be good. Ooh, iron ring. Okay. Oh, that gives me a little bit of extra armor. Nice. Oh, I should probably make myself like a chest plate now, huh? For some extra armor. There we go. I'm all strapped up. I don't have any good hats to wear, so I need to find some better hats. The only ones I have are the fucking goggles and the Elves of Fellow Prince. Took me to take my pets and I passed. Yeah. The thing is that I'm so sad because I didn't drive. I did not. I've only been driving for like I've only been practicing for like a month. So, but I do have a driving lesson coming up to go over the test, so. Alright, let's go. Let's go over here. Let's set a let's set a temporary waypoint over there, which is over that way. I want to see what's over there. I want to find some cool stuff, some loot. I don't know. But yeah, I think I might also, if it helps, I haven't driven in multiple months. We can both be noobs together. Oh, that's, yeah. Yeah, but at least you have a license though, so it does mean you can drive if you wanted to. Cause if once I get my license, then I am free. Although it is still very scary, is the thing. Where's we're too busy once you pass the test? I don't know. I mean, I have a convention coming up in July, but I doubt I'm gonna want to drive to that because it's like 2 hours away. So I don't think I'm ready for that just yet. Hammy road trip. I wish. It's still very scary when driving, so I don't think I'm too ready for anything like for. Oh, there's a village over there. Hold on. I gotta get that. Gotta get that waypoint. I don't think I'm ready for anything too scary and stuff, but yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I don't want to drive too far. Maybe I'll go to like fucking, like I did drive. I did drive all the way to the Korean market not by myself. You know, someone else was in the car with me, which was very exciting that I could do that. But I definitely made like a lot of mistakes. I think like nothing like illegal, I guess, but just stuff that I wouldn't make now, like mistakes I wouldn't make now. I think, at least I hope I wouldn't. Is there any chests in here I can loot? Oh, there is. There's an aged photograph. Oh, lemongrass seeds. I'll take these. Garlic. I'll take garlic as well. Cool. Alright, so that's more seeds for the farm. Put over here. Oh, I could also plant the strawberries. I completely forgot I had those on me. Alright. Did I bring my... Shit. I didn't bring my fucking sleeping bag because I'm stupid. I think some things come in practice after you... Yeah, it will not give me all the driving experience. That is true. I forgot my my sleeping bag. God dang it. But yeah, I'm excited to finally hopefully go on my own, I guess. Not have to rely on people to drive me everywhere is gonna be very nice. Where is that damn waystone? Okay, maybe it's down there probably. Where's the rest of the village is what I want to know. Oh, it's over here. Oh, there's a farm here. Okay. Okay, where's the fucking waystone? I'm gonna go for now. Oh, okay. Alrighty. Bye bye. Thanks for dropping by. Thanks for dropping by. I might. Oh, what was that? Oh, there's like a thing that popped up. Oh, that's cool. I might stop soon, but I don't know. Let's see. Because I am getting a little, or like my neck is, you know, kind of killing me. Oh, the waystone is over there. Okay. I think it's over here at least. Might be? Oh, there's a fucking creeper. Ow. Ow. I probably shouldn't leave that open. Ow. Jesus, this village generation is fucked. Is there even a waystone anywhere? Yeah, you've been alive for a while? Make sure to rest well? Yeah. Oh no. Okay, this might kill me. Way down here. Geronimo! Okay, I didn't die. There's a zombie behind me, so... Proper golem. Okay. Alright, well... I'm just gonna let myself drown. And then head back to the house, and then we're gonna wrap up stream, I think. I can hear that zombie. I can hear him. He's like right there. Ow. 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 Okay. Right, alrighty. Okay. Well, yeah, I did quite a lot. My neck's starting to hurt, so I need to... I think that was a good time to wrap up for today. Alrighty. Okay, so thank you so much to everyone who dropped by to say hi and hang out with me today. I had a lot of fun. I'm gonna stream more, I think tomorrow. Wait, hold on. Okay, I was about to say tomorrow's not the 24th. Tomorrow I might take a day off from streaming, because I want to prepare for the 24th, because that's when Deltarune comes out, and I'm very, 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 very excited for Deltarune. Thank you so much for thank you so much for dropping by. It means a lot. Oh wow, the game is really quiet. I'm just now seeing the desktop audio. But thank you guys so much for dropping by. I had a lot of fun. Yeah, tomorrow I'm not gonna stream tomorrow, or I'm gonna stream Dave the Diver tomorrow, because tomorrow I might want to focus on making some more designs for my for the convention that I'm gonna be vending at. But we'll see. Anyways, thank you guys so much for dropping by. I had a lot of fun today, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.